Hello, I am the Deer Runner, and this is going to be my first video in which I investigate the Plushtrap minigame in the FNAF 4 game. Now, I make it a comprehensive theory by analyzing the order of events and the images that we see in this dream. It's best to start us off at this point. Anything that is from real life that is seen in a dream is because of prior knowledge. So whatever created this dream must have known that Springtrap had rotted to a green color. Now let's look for chronological events to get who could have known this and reach a surprising result. First, let's eliminate the general public as a suspect. There was a harmful defect in a spring-lock animatronics that Springtrap came from. The defect was in a mechanism called spring lock, in which caused an injury that was described as enough bleeding to seep through all the padding. But the actual injury that decommissioned him was described as multiple spring lock failures. Such a defect like this in the main attraction would have labeled them as dangerous, and because they're supposed to be entertaining kids and now it's down to safeties in question, would force them to decommission them, which they did. A company called Fredbear Fright gathered all the remaining things from this failed pizzeria and put it in a little horror attraction. Now, 6 days before everything was burned away, they discovered Springtrap, which now again it was public knowledge again, and it was green at this point. But during this period, no one was killed, injured, or went missing, so no one could have contributed this data to this dream. Then after the fire, there was an ending in which all the souls go to rest, meaning that there was no more mechanism to attach anyone to this dream. So if this was from this area, he would have been A, a non-existent person being attached to this dream, or B, a random person being attached to the dream by a now non-existent mechanism. Both things are impossible, so it could never happen. So at no point does the company's advertising or official use of the Springtrap ever contributed this data to this dream. Let's go after one of the most popular suspects, the Fazbear franchise itself. There was a report that one of the Springlock animatronics was stolen, but ever since then, Golden Freddy had been following the franchise while Springtrap had followed the killer who was also following the franchise. And then much later down the road, Springtrap was displayed as green, while Golden Freddy had retained its original yellow color, which means they were probably stored in two different areas, because the green color was caused by rot. And when the franchise threw out all its animatronics, they didn't touch Springtrap. Since there was no reason to keep him, that meant they probably never had him at the time. So no, they never did recover it. The killer's soul is the one that possessed Springtrap, and there's no indication that the animatronic can't tell what color it is. And the children's souls accesses one room in which Springtrap was stored inside, and it was shown that the Springtrap was yellow at that point. Public Eye would probably have maintained him, probably to lure more children, had reasons to, then cornered and killed by the children's souls. And after that had a few decades of dead body rotting away inside of it, with being constantly soaked, which would create the green color. Not only are they the only suspects, the green color data was only available after this incident, which also means FNAF 4 could have only taken place after this incident. Now we should try to verify this whole story before we make a big conclusion like that. This room is located in the last restaurant they ever owned. At this point the company had been attacked by the killer and had the animatronics malfunctioning. They put up a camera system anywhere an incident could take place. Of course not putting in the bathroom because that would be creepy, and instead they took the doors off to have easy access. And the security room that seemed to always be manned at all times. Now, this room has no business not having a camera on now. Only reason why they wouldn't have one in there is because it was completely sealed. And since Springtrap had fell in plain sight inside the room, and it wasn't thrown away like the others, it meant the management had not gone inside the room at all, or at least when the killer had fallen in that room. This would be a perfect place for a scavenger that looked through the place multiple years after it closed down, because the surface of the door that was painted over is a different material than the surface of the wall, so it would decay at a different rate. Scavengers with Fredbear Fright obviously see there's a door there and go inside, which completely supports the timeline. This is all I could find, and it all says that these are the only suspects that could have contributed the green color of Springtrap to the FNAF 4 dream. Now I expect such a conclusion, with this also being FNAF 4 takes place after the killer dies, would probably be reflected in other ways as well. As his dreams often symbolize this stuff, we're going to look to the rest of the Plushtrap minigame. Now, the core rules make this game way too easy and the reward too irrelevant, so it's unlikely that the rules were chosen to make an effective game. Instead, it probably was chosen to represent something else. Now we looked to events that involved all the suspects we had. We found that one of them meets all the criteria needed for this game to have represented it, which is the event that we have just talked about, when the killer and the animatronics try to kill each other. The game was too easy choosing between winning and losing, so instead this choice was to see two different results. First one was a losing, in which represents the first half of this event, in which the killer sneaks through the darkness and ambushes the animatronics, which is what Plushtrap does to you. The second choice, winning, represents the rest of the story, in which the ghost tricks the killer into going to his stationary trap, which is springtrap, by making it look like they're not able to fight back effectively and he has the upper hand by stopping as he goes into the suit. Which is also what you have to do to trick Plushtrap in that way, to make him think that he has an upper hand when he doesn't, and let him go into his stationary trap, which is the X. And using his springtrap form shows what happened to him directly after that incident in which he became an animatronic. You could avoid with being the Plushtrap minigame, which is 2 hours off the next time you played a bedroom level, which has been deemed very useless. Now we look back to the event where the killer and the animatronics tried to kill each other to see if we can find out if it came from this. To talk about time, we're going to look to how long it took for this event to take place. Now, Foxy was the last one to attack, and he attacks from the same way he attacks in the first game, so he probably inherited the delay that he gets from the first game, which is he attacks about sometime past 1 o'clock, probably halfway through it. And then there's an event that takes place after, in which a ghost attack, in which they corner the killer and kill him. Now, there's an in-between period also in which a killer was in a soaking wet building with water dripping in from the roof and everything. So he would probably be very uncomfortable and wanted to get out of there. So the ghost would have to have attacked him soon after he defeated Foxy. That event probably took less than an hour, which would put it very close to the point to the 2-hour mark. The memory I'm saying that the Plushtrap is based off of is very traumatic or very important to the people involved, and it's been shown to be in your face in a bizarre way multiple times. So it's probably shown in other areas. I found them, they're very bizarre, and they look completely different from each other, but they all have the same content. Let's start with the minigame. Now, many of us notice a discrepancy within the color coding system of the dialogue. The colors represent who is talking, but this green one was the only one that represented two people, and it was the color springtrap. Both of them indicates a location within the minigame. Now, the girl indicates herself, and the guy talks about the incident where the kid gets killed. This took me a very long time to decode. The images you see in this location are a bunch of puzzle pieces that, when combined together, tells the exact same data as a Plushtrap minigame said about the battle between the killer and the animatronics. Each part of the event told is represented by a single piece of the image. Also, the green dialogue gives criteria on which parts are not included. I want to say again, this took me a very long time to decode, but I'll decipher it for you right now. The 2 hours are represented by the 6-day increments that are recorded in the minigame. The killer had to survive 6 hours, but only made it through 2 hours during that night. The amount of day difference between the two dialogue locations is 2. The animatronics are represented by the mask, and the killer is represented by the symbol on their shirt, which is never seen on any other child in the minigame, which is a heart. Which a heart symbolizes like you really love something. Well, he really loves killing children. That's like his desire in his life. Which shows the desire has been put into springtrap with her hand inside the Plushtrap that's a puppet, which only would describe the killer. The masked kids are performing an action that end result would kill, with one of them wearing a springtrap green shirt, which means the animatronics and the killer were performing an action that would kill. The killer's death was shown by the green dialogue of the girl, which describes a toned-down version of the killer's death, with being uncareful while inside springtrap can get your body parts pinched. The killer becoming animatronic after death represented by the black eyes of the green-shirted kid that represents the killer fighting. The black eyes are only on animatronics that attempt an offense action, which is what the kid is doing. The restaurant where the battle takes place is seen in the vision in a restaurant that happens before it, and seen to match the dimensions of the restaurant with the Springlock animatronics. The battle restaurant is a reopened version of the Springlock restaurant. Now, there's things that are not used, and we're going to show you that these things are not actually part of the equation. Now, the things that the kid talked about wouldn't have caused this kind of laughter. So this laughter is actually part of the criteria where the data is, in which there has to be continuous laughter. Now, when the point where Golden Freddy and Springtrap was there, the kid died. So at that point, all laughter stopped. So that means they're actually outside of where all the relevant data is. The non-green dialogue can't be used because relevant data must be represented by green dialogue. This kid directly talks to the child and references him. When he talks about the kid, he'd be referencing the kid in that location, but that's outside of the range of where all the relevant data is. Also, the puppet is the most powerful and the first animatronic. He might have just been showing influence in areas that he usually don't have any influence in. All pieces of this part of the minigame are accounted for, and all pieces represent different parts that other pieces don't represent, and everything that the Plushtrap minigame represents is represented. This is a very organized and very encrypted secret. Now, this equation is hidden in the way this level is structured, but there's also two other legitimate equations that string structures to this bedroom. They're a lot more obvious than the one we want to talk about, but when you finally have all three together, you realize that they don't just occupy the same space, they're all related. Now, the 2 hours is represented by the 2-hour reward. The animatronics are demonic forms of themselves, and the killer and honestly all the events are represented by your actions. Now, when Killer attacked the animatronics, he needed a flashlight to stun them, or they would have ripped them apart, just like you. But his attacks were inefficient and they kept on coming back, just like you. Then he had to hold out in a single room designed for children, just like you. End result? You see the purple robot there? The killer is now an animatronic. The two equations uses the purple on the fan and the phone to represent the security room, but the event did not take place in the security room. And now the caterpillar with a little string attached to it obviously has mechanical parts get moved because of it, and it would make noise, with emphasis on you listening to it with the purple in its ears. That's Music Box. And the animatronics attack in the same direction as you in the second game. So it looks like the second game. The animatronics are from the first game, and they use similar tactics you use in that game, and also how you push them back is very similar to the way you do in the first game. Now, dismiss this Nightmare Freddy thing. Golden Freddy's been showing some unusual amount of influence compared to the other animatronics. This might just be another one of the forms of those things, because of how similar it is to its normal form. So the two equations is the security guard surviving in the first and second game. We find it hard to believe that a security guard would save 5 nights, let alone survive one location and go to the other location and work there. Now, the only one who would do this was actually the killer, who, the main premise of the game is, he was dressed up as a security guard, probably worked as a security guard, and lured the children to the back and killed them, and now the dead children's souls want to take revenge, but he can't tell the difference between the security guard and the killer, because of the uniform. The character you control interacts with all three equations completely in a way that the killer would have, and all the representations of the animatronics is from the way the killer would have perceived them. Now, the important way that all three of them are related is that the killer is the only one that can represent all three of them at once. So all three perspectives are from the killer. This is also seen in the others with the Plushtrap minigame and the animatronic's complex thought patterns being described in a very simple way with an on and off flashlight. But the killer was described with an animatronic running in and out of the rooms and attacking. In the minigame, multiple things reference the killer, and his desires in his life were represented. But the animatronics seems just part of the description. The killer animatronics were there and they were attacking each other, was the only thing mentioned. Now, the main perspective of being from the killer was only really visible in many of these areas if you decoded the Plushtrap minigame in the way that I did. That meant that this could be as a purpose of the Plushtrap minigame. This encompasses most of the game, and having the dreamer as the perspective of a killer would put him as the dreamer. But one more thing this would need to be answered first. Who is the perspective of the crying child minigame? The kid is clearly not the killer, though you're the one that's controlling him, but the camera angle seems to be of an adult eye level through the whole minigame except for this house, in which houses can have windows at any point, and every single image, even the highest angle view in the kid's bedroom, is at an angle as if someone is peeking through the window. We do see a purple guy in this image, but it has been shown that the animatronics aren't able to tell the difference between the security guard and the killer. The animatronics label the killer as purple, and all the security guards labeled as a killer, so all security guards are labeled as purple. Since the killer is an animatronic, he could just be seeing the label that all the other animatronics see. And the kid's death, if this guy was really tracking the kid the whole time, he probably is responsible for this death, though he is clearly looking at him from a distance. The company decided to continue use of these spring-lock suits despite the dangerous defects discovered, so they had to give the employees detailed information on how to properly use the animatronics to not get hurt. So at some point the killer probably had specific information on the dangers of the jaw region of the Golden Freddy. that's not really advertised to the public. It would really hurt their image for them being a child play company to have dangerous defects in the main attraction. So he would be able to trick a bunch of kids who just wanted to mess with that child, to put the child in a situation to get him killed, and would have the full knowledge to do it because he's an employee. This seems very plausible, but it says that it encompasses the entire game, which means it must be able to explain all the controversies, and every single thing we've seen in the game must have an explanation for it from this theory. So we're going to look for them right now. The killer received tremendous damage when he died, but the only part of his body that wasn't covered by the suit that allowed us to see where the damage was his eyes, in which it showed that he was completely conscious, so he probably didn't receive any major head trauma, and it showed fear, which frontal lobe region regulates fear, so it has to have been intact for him to have shown it. So the killer cannot be affected by the frontal lobe damage that plagued the other theories. The killer didn't die immediately. He was in his pool of his own blood for a while, in which he had plenty of time to traumatically realize that he needed medical attention. But it never came, but since this was so traumatic before he started his dream, it would form in the dream as medical equipment. Now the promos, and advertisements, and the title screen all seemed straightforward, saying that the kid that you're playing as went to a fast food restaurant, brought something back that was horrible, and now is trying to kill him. My theory says that this is not true, but since it's part of the same game, it must be able to coexist with that statement. Here's how it's done. Ghosts that were horribly murdered by someone and tortured, in these stories usually want to have the killer, or the people that wronged him, to pay in a way that is equal to the way they were wronged. The children went to the fast food restaurant too, to have fun. It was going to be a place of joy. Well, and they found something horrible, which was the killer, which is what's indicated on the advertisements. But one of the children wasn't lured to the back room and actually made an escape from the place and tried to flee back to his house, which the killer was in pursuit, which the title screen shows the animatronics on it is in pursuit, not actually where the killer is yet and heading to the house, which is a house that the kid also chose to go to, and chose to go to his bedroom, which the killer is forced to stay in. In the bedroom, he finds the two torturous events. He can't leave his bedroom, which a killer can't either, and a foxy head jumping out of him roaring without actually striking him, which a killer also has to face. Honestly, with the amount of years that the animatronics had the soul of the killer, they probably had have tortured him, and I would have expected something like this to be the way he would be tortured. In the first game, the paranormal activities were off the charts, and the spirits were talking about the deaths that occurred at the restaurant that the crying child died in. But the child was not specifically mentioned, but he must have, so he must have been grouped up with a group of missing children. But for the police to have said that they all went missing at the same time, it would have to have been less than 24 hours between the kid's death and the other kids' deaths. Now the likelihood that a group of kids would accidentally kill the child off and a killer killing off the children off at the same time is zero, unless it was related. Now the reason why Golden Freddy is given the name Fredbear during this game is probably because when Golden Freddy was actually officially released to the public, it was during the time before the internet search engines. So now getting data on him was much more difficult for the security guards who were being attacked by Golden Freddy, so they just named him after something that they were familiar with, Freddy Fazbear. But the killer was there during the time of the first restaurant, the Fredbear Diner, in which the single animatronic named Fredbear was there. And when they closed down because of him and reopened it and had a new yellow bear, he would probably call him Fredbear because of his prior knowledge. There are two events involving the killer in which he is killed off and captured by the animatronics, and then a decade later he's walking around on a leash as a springtrap with no event between these parts. My theory finally puts an event between these parts, and since it's an entire game, every official ending is that the person survives and it leads to some type of significance, whether it be big or small. Now, since we're missing the point where it was even possible for the killer to escape, this is probably the significance of this game because this is the only event that even takes place between these two things. Now, for the random placement of the animatronics are directly influenced to the stream as a punishment. This influence would probably display the animatronics with some extra equations. Not seeing them at all would make less sense. Well, that's all I could find, and not only did it survive, it answered in more detail than any other theory that I heard so far. Well, I'd say that's a pretty good point to end my video. This has been fun. I never did anything like this before, and I hope to make more. This has been the Deer Runner, the runner of deer. Thanks for watching.